Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm back to do another weekly reading update. This one will be quicker than usual, I think, assuming I won't talk too much about the two books that I have to talk about. So I will just jump right in. So first up I have The Vanishing Girl by Josephine Ruby. So for this week's episode of Read or Dead, which is the mystery thriller podcast that I co-host, there's a link in the description as always, we decided to do a Scooby-Doo themed episode, and so Katie read Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero, and so I read this one, and this is a young adult adaptation of like the Scooby-Doo story. This is actually the first book in a series that's being called the Daphne and Velma series, and as you could figure out based on that series title, this story specifically follows Daphne and Velma. So this is basically like if Scooby-Doo got kind of the Riverdale treatment. It's not quite as like out there as Riverdale is, but it definitely has similar vibes to kind of like these reboots that are coming to the CW and things like that. So the story is told completely from Daphne and Velma's point of view. It alternates perspectives between the two of them. And in this world that Josephine Ruby has created, Daphne and Velma are characters who used to be friends but currently are not. They're in high school when this book is taking place, and when they were younger, they used to hang out with Fred and Shaggy and Scooby, of course, who is Shaggy's dog. And they used to like either pretend to solve crimes or they would like solve really like minor crimes, so to speak. But then Velma ends up finding out some stuff about Daphne's mom and basically that she's having an affair while like doing these investigations. And then after that point, Daphne and Velma basically just don't talk to each other anymore. Velma is, kind of an outcast nerdy girl at the school. She doesn't really have a whole lot of friends. So Daphne is extremely popular. Fred is popular as well. He doesn't make too much of an appearance in this first book. And Shaggy is kind of like the stoner popular kid, basically, where he's kind of mysterious. He has wealthy parents, and it's not really clear sort of where he stands in everything, at least the way the story starts off. But you don't get too much from Fred and Shaggy, but you do get a little bit more about Shaggy than you do about Fred. So yeah, Daphne and Velma aren't friends anymore, but then they end up teaming up one day when one of Daphne's friends ends up going missing. And actually, like right before she went missing, she started saying that she was seeing ghosts at this like theme park, amusement park type of thing that Velma's mom works at. And so Velma decides to help Daphne out because this is like directly impacting her and her mom's potential job. And the two of them, team up and try to solve this case. So yeah, this is a book where like I don't really know how to rate it. Like I listened to it on audiobook. It's available on audio on Hoopla, and I feel like it's like a fun story, like in that sense of like a CW show where I wouldn't say it's like high quality work or anything like that, but it is fun. If you have like no attachment to Scooby-Doo whatsoever, I can't imagine this working very well for you because it doesn't necessarily lay a lot of groundwork for like the characters or anything like that. Like they're basically assuming that you have some knowledge on Scooby-Doo and you'll like bring that with you to these stories. I also felt like it was kind of on the shorter side, but again, it's a young adult book and I was listening to it on audio, so that might have like sort of messed with sort of my perceptions of the story. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily like the most compelling book ever. There is a second book already out, and the audiobook for that is also on Hoopla, so I might give it a chance eventually, but it's not something I would say like run out and pick it up right away. But if you are someone who like really loves Scooby-Doo, maybe this will be up your alley. And the other book I finished is Diamond Doris by Doris Payne, and the subtitle to this, and I am terrible at remembering subtitles, is The True Story of the World's Most Notorious Jewel Thief. So this is basically like a memoir slash autobiography. It's written by Doris Payne, although there is like a co-author listed on the cover, and it's basically Doris Payne reflecting on her life. She spent basically like 60-ish years of her life being a jewel thief, like from her 20s until her 80s. She was basically like robbing jewelry stores, and she wasn't doing like these major complicated heists or anything like that. She would basically just walk into stores, pretend to be a customer, do some sleight of hand and trick them a little bit to getting a little bit confused, and then would just like walk out with pieces that are worth thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this is another one of those books where I just have like extremely mixed feelings about. So like the pros of this book is that this story is really fascinating, and obviously like Doris Payne herself is an extremely fascinating person. Watching and reading this story unfold is kind of like wild, because you don't see or hear a lot of stories like this, like real stories like this. It's one of those things where, like, if you didn't say that it was a nonfiction book, it would feel too ridiculous to be a fiction book. So that, combined with the fact that, like, it's a relatively short book, like, I was very much compelled by this story. Another thing is that, like, this isn't just like the story about her robbing all of these jewelry stores over the course of decades. It is also about sort of like her family history and things like that, and sort of like what led her to the different choices that she's made over the years. But definitely, like, the most compelling part of the story is the fact that, like, she starts off basically swiping pieces from, like, these small mom and pop shops, and eventually, like, continues to raise the bar, expands, and goes to other cities, eventually goes international and steals from people like Cartier and, like, these major brands that you're like, how is that even possible? Which leads into, like, my con list, which is that there isn't a lot of, like, explanation, in my opinion. Like, this is a story that's super fascinating, but needs to be written from the point of view of, like, a journalist or some outside perspective, so that way that person can go and talk to other people. There's just, like, a lot of hand waving around the fact that, like, Doris Payne did this for decades, and a lot of people knew about it, like, including, like, law enforcement and whatnot, and yet, like, no one really seemed to do anything about it. There is part of it that is explained away as, like, the pieces that Doris is stealing, she basically sells away to a lot of, like, politicians and people in power, so, like, they are not going to stop her because they're getting all of these pieces from her. It really doesn't make any sense to me that, like, she was just a woman. I shouldn't say just a woman, because obviously she's, like, doing a good job, but she's, like, this woman who lived in Cleveland for almost her entire life and just, like, did these jobs and then would return home to Cleveland. Like, that's wild, and it feels also like something that would never happen anymore. Like, Doris Payne was born in, like, the 40s or 50s, and so I think part of it is just, like, the escalation of technology and stuff that makes it impossible for stuff like this to happen at, like, this scale or this level. And she even like, briefly mentions it, like, that towards the end, when she, not to, like, get too much into spoilery territory, but a lot of the consequences that came about later in life mostly just had to do with things like technology and the internet. So yeah, I had, again, just, like, very mixed feelings about it, just because, like, I find this person to be extremely fascinating, but it's not necessarily, like, satisfying enough for my personal tastes. I don't know if anyone, like, in the FBI or Interpol or anything like that would ever actually, like, go on the record and talk to someone about this stuff, but if there could be, like, a Bad Blood-esque true crime story, or, like, Feather Thief-esque true crime book written about this woman, I would 100% pick that up. So that's everything I've finished so far as of this recording, which is being done on Thursday. So yeah, I am currently in the middle of Winter Counts by David Heska Whiten. I am, like, about halfway through this book, and I am really enjoying it. Like, I'm very surprised by how quickly I'm flying through this book. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do an individual review on this one, but I'm, like, leaning towards it. But it also kind of depends on, you know, my energy levels and time management and all of that stuff over the course of this weekend. So if you don't see a review on Monday, it'll be probably talked about in my weekly wrap up. You'll find out next Friday no matter what's going on with this, but I can say so far I'm really enjoying this book. And yeah, other than that, I don't really have too much more to talk about. So I will wrap it up there. Let me know down in the comments below if you have read either of the books I talked about today, which I will be very surprised if there are a lot of people, because both of these have, like, relatively low ratings on Goodreads right now. Or feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know what you've been reading lately, if you've picked up anything that you are really enjoying. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.